While I'm waiting for the glue on the tray for the Ranger 2000 to dry, I thought I'd just go over this wiring layout for the PixHawk Lite. So stay tuned.
This is MinimOSD.
So let's start up here at 12 o'clock and then we'll just go around in a circle and explain what everything is. So up here is the Easy UHF receiver, and it's in PPM mode. Now you could use different receivers as long as they do PPM. You could hook it up the same way. You could use a FreeSky, for example. But I've got the Easy UHF long range system. The antenna for it's down here and the cable runs underneath up to here. Okay, so the PPM signal's going down here and plugs on this pin right here on the PixHawk. And then we have our servos. Now that's a question a lot of people ask, is how are the servos connected? You can see that there's 4 connections here. Now this first connection right here is the ailerons. And then we have the elevator. And then the throttle, which goes to the ESC. And then finally the rudder. Now there's a couple of changes sometimes you have to make in the mission planner in order to get the servos to actually function. And I got the tip from, I believe it was Rag the Nuts Off channel. Matt, I believe is his name, had a video on setting those settings in the mission planner. But once you get the settings in, it should go ahead. There's safety settings that can be overridden so that the servos will work right on the bench. You don't have to wait for a GPS fix and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's that. Now I'm going to move down around here. We got the servos. Now this connection right here is a UBEC providing 5 volts to the bus. Because you need 5 volts from somewhere. This bus doesn't have 5 volts on it already. So you can plug that on there and get 5 volts to run the servos. On a copter, that may not be so important. In fact, I don't think you need it. You'll probably notice here I have the wire for the 5 volts for the throttle disconnected because I'm not going to be using that. The wire goes over here to the ESC, which has a UBEC in it, or a BEC, and I'm not going to use the power from the ESC at all. Instead, I'm using this UBEC right here. So the UBEC is actually soldered on. Let's see if I can get this down here. So it's soldered on right there to a connector that connects to a pigtail that I soldered onto the power module right here on the output of the power module. The power module measures the voltage and current, so I wanted to get the UBEC on the output of it so the servo current also gets measured. So that's right there, and then of course the power module also goes to the ESC right here, which runs the motor. And then this wire here is for the voltage and ground from the power module over here, and it also has the current sense and the voltage sense wires from the power module. Now moving around here, we have the main flight battery right here, and that just plugs on right here onto the power module. Then we got the GPS. This is a U-Blox MN8, I believe, or M8N, I think it is. That's a GPS right there. And I have the compass plugged in right here on this connector, but I actually don't need it for a plane. Compass isn't necessary for a plane. In fact, it causes trouble, so you could leave that off if you wanted to, or just disable it in the mission planner. These 2 wires are I think the white and the blue one are for the GPS, and they plug onto this connector right here. And you also need 5 volts in ground. Okay, now let's get to the FPV portion. So up here we have a UBEC right here that's actually powering the 5 volts for the MinimOSD and the separate camera battery over here. I like to use a battery that's separate from the flight battery because it reduces the noise. There's a lot of noise coming from the motors running and the servos and all that get into the cables on the main flight battery. And if you use that for your FPV, you'll get all kinds of noise in the picture. So I like to use a separate battery. An alternative would be to use a line filter from the main battery to filter it before it powers the FPV system. But anyway, I've got a UBEC powering both stages of the MinimOSD, and I'll probably also have to run a wire from the 12 volts over to the transmitter. This is the transmitter. I'll have to do that later to power the transmitter and the camera. But right now I've just got it laid out so you can see it. So the camera plugs up on the top pins and the transmitter on the bottom pins, and that's that. Now this critter over here is actually the telemetry radio. You don't have to have that, but I've got it there anyway. It allows you to change settings in the mission planner wirelessly by using a radio link, a telemetry radio link. And you can also see flight data while it's flying if you have your computer running, your laptop or whatever, or a ground station on a mobile device. You can see the telemetry data coming over the radio link. Now the transmit line for the radio is split from the same line that goes to the MinimOSD. The receive line, however, is separate for this. There is no receive line from the PixHawk going to the MinimOSD, just the transmit. You transmit to the MinimOSD to put it up on the screen, but you don't receive anything from the MinimOSD. However, the telemetry receives and transmits, so you have both wires going to that. And then you have 5 volts and ground on here. And as I said, I have a separate 5 volts and ground for the MinimOSD. There's a barometer on the bottom of this, a little can with a hole in it, and it's recommended that you put foam over that when you secure this to keep the wind from getting into the barometer and throwing that off. I think that's about it. That should be all the wiring, and at least it gives you a basic idea how everything goes together. Okay, I hope that helps. If anyone's got a PixHawk or PixHawk Lite and wants to do an FPV setup, this is one way you can do it.